Yeah, I read that one. And in fact, in that MIAC report, the Missouri report, they even said if you're concerned about RFID, then you may fit the profile of a domestic terrorist. So I guess a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. I think that whole move towards profiling individuals is going to be accelerated immensely if we get these RFID tag driver's licenses. Let me give you an example. I'm going to be giving a speech this evening here in Albany for the John Birch Society. And it is possible for people at the door to simply pay a couple of bucks and walk in and be part of that group. I've spoken to groups all over the country, literally thousands or probably tens of thousands of people at this point. If they wanted to, let's say we fast forward 10 years to the point where many of the people in the audience would have one of these enhanced driver's licenses in their wallets, especially if they become mandatory. If they wanted to, the government could simply pose as yet another person interested in getting the information, mill around the crowd with an RFID reader in their backpack, and collect these unique ID numbers for every single person at that event, and then put them on a watch list for being interested in RFID. Heavens, I mean, that's crazy, but that's one of the things they actually said in that Missouri report. Another example, depending on your politics, any First Amendment protected event could be subject to the same kind of tracking. You could have FBI agents showing up at a gun rally or a peace march or a pro-choice or an anti-abortion event, whatever it might be, and simply by walking through the crowd with a reader device, they could download scores, dozens, hundreds of unique ID numbers from these individuals, and then immediately one-to-one identify them through this federal government database of who they are. Not just who they are, where they live, with their eye color and their height and their date of birth and their place of birth and every other piece of information that would be connected with an identification document. Clearly, in the Constitution, there is no authority for the government to do that, and indeed, there are some very specific restrictions against the government doing this sort of thing. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, of course, in the Bill of Rights, gives us the right to be free from search and seizure without a warrant that the government would be engaging in, tracking people and rifling through their wallets and figuring out what they're carrying and wearing. So obviously all of this is very much against the Constitution, and I think it's also, as a Bible-believing Christian, I think it's against the religious and spiritual beliefs of many, many people. And I don't think you even need to have those particular beliefs to find this repugnant. There are, one of the things that I really like about working on RFID is it really unites people from the left and the right, from all sides of the political spectrum, as they say, well, gee, nobody really wants to be spied on, no matter what your beliefs are. So it's been kind of interesting seeing the Cato Institute and the ACLU together in the same room testifying against the same technology. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as we begin to realize this is not about left and right. It's not about Christian, Muslim, Jew, atheist, that this is really about freedom versus control. That's really what this boils down to. And you're going to see a polarization in this nation of people who are going to split along those two lines. And I'm looking forward to the time when we all unite over our other differences and say, listen, I'm for freedom and I don't care about the other stuff. The real problem when you start creating databases of information is you create what I've before called low-hanging fruit. You create a very simple one-stop target for anyone who wants to capture that information and use it to create fake identity documents or to essentially hack the system. So you take a look at California, for example. California has had a huge problem with criminals, essentially criminal gangs, infiltrating their Department of Motor Vehicles, literally getting jobs there, becoming supervisors there, and then using their position to obtain driver's licenses and identity documents for undocumented immigrants, we'll call it that. And then using that for criminal purposes to create fake ID cards for people. The California Department of Motor Vehicles periodically has to go in and have a purge and fire enormous numbers of people. They've done it now several times. Well, the problem, if you're in California, well, gee, tough luck. I'm over here in New Hampshire. We're out here in New York. We don't have to worry about that because the focus is really in California where they've got a big illegal immigration problem. Once you have a national database, though, then obviously all of those criminals are going to move their way over to the Department of Homeland Security, and they're going to start hacking into all of our driver's licenses and hacking into all of our photographic databases and personal information and social security numbers and using it to create these fake ID numbers in mass. And to think that that's not going to happen, I think is to be incredibly naive. Well, I think the key thing that we need to do is educate the public. I am shocked at the number of people who have signed up for these enhanced driver's licenses without having read spy chips, without having informed or educated themselves about this issue, believing the mollifications that they've been given by their departments of motor vehicles in the states of now Washington and New York, and soon these other states as well. We need to educate them and let them know, listen, what you've just put in your wallet is not just an easy way to cross the border. What you just put in your wallet is a remotely readable tracking device, and here are the dangers of it. See, people don't understand that. I think until we get that level of understanding, and of course there's a second piece to it too, is people need to understand that government is not necessarily their friend. And I think that's one of the issues that Campaign for Liberty is really, I think it's crucial, the sorts of things that you all are doing in educating people about government abuses, about government, excessive government power. One of the things that guides my research, and one of the things that has motivated me to spend 10 years of my life now working on freedom and privacy issues, is a book by R.J. Rummel. He's a University of Hawaii professor. He wrote a book called Death by Government. And he's devoted an entire academic career, literally decades, to researching something he calls democide, which is the killing of people by their own governments. And what he has discovered is that in the 20th century alone, that more people, in fact 6 times more people, were murdered in cold blood by their own governments than were killed by all of the century's wars combined. And he concluded from that government is the most deadly force on planet Earth, second only to natural causes and disease. So literally, if you empower your government, this is also what he discovered, that what distinguished countries whose governments behave themselves versus those whose governments became oppressive, abusive, corrupt, and ultimately deadly, was the amount of power that the people had given those governments. That was well understood by the founding fathers of this country. It's one of the reasons why they crafted a constitution to keep us protected against excessive government power. It's one of the reasons we had we have it in the Constitution, but we had pretty strong checks and balances to try to prevent any one branch of the government from becoming excessively powerful. And that's because those founding fathers understood full well that excessive government power leads to abuse, and perhaps they even understood that it would lead to genocide and the sorts of things we've seen in the last century. Well, I've got a daily radio program. I'm on Monday through Friday from 4 to 6, right after Alex Jones on the Genesis Communications Network. That's online at gcnlive.com, GCN for Genesis Communications Network. My personal website is online at katherinealbrecht.com. And we've got 2 other websites that people may be interested in. The Spy Chips website contains a lot of the information from our book, Spy Chips. Information about product tagging, places where you might find RFID tags slipped into things, an explanation about RFID, and a lot of stories of our battles fighting against the industry, in many cases quite successfully, I may add. And if you're interested in learning more about microchip implants and their link to cancer, we have not only an extensive cancer study, but also an 85-question FAQ document that answers any possible thing you could ever want to know about microchip implants in humans or in animals, and that's online at antichips.com. And hopefully between all of that, you should be able to catch up on the RFID story. And if I could put in a plug, we spent 3 years of our lives writing this book. I have a doctorate from Harvard University, so I'm a well-trained researcher. My co-author, Liz McIntyre, is a former federal bank examiner and one heck of a researcher and also a hilariously funny writer. And this book is not only impeccably well-researched, it has hundreds of footnotes, but it's also a page-turning, entertaining read. And I would recommend at this time, our only mistake was the book came out a couple of years before its time. Its time is right now. This is the time that people should be reading Spy Chips, because all of the things that were being discussed in this book that we put together are all now coming to fruition. So take 5-6 hours out of your life, read the book, and you will be an expert on RFID, and you'll know almost as much as I do, because I put it all in the book. Thank you, Stephen. It's been a pleasure talking to you.